Welcome into the Big Little Podcast, everybody. I'm your host, Patrick Previty. That is Andrew Greig. Week 4 of the NFL is over, as well as week 5 of college football. So that's what we're going to cover today. First, we're going to start with college football, reacting a little bit to the AP poll rankings. Did you have anything that stood out from the recent rankings?
Yeah, so a couple of things. I think that the fact that Alabama is not over Texas at this point is a little bit curious because the fact that Texas hasn't played anybody. Alabama gets a top 5 win in Georgia on the road at Georgia, a team that hadn't lost there in multiple years, had a 33-game home winning streak, the longest in college football. Them only rising up to number 10 in the country after putting on such a good performance. To be fair, Georgia handed them the game a little bit towards the end there. They definitely had multiple opportunities to win that game and just couldn't pull it out. But still, I think that win means enough to at least jump Texas, even though Alabama was sitting at 17 before. And then moving off that, Penn State being still in the top 7-ish. I think that Indiana definitely could have, with their win so far this season, could have been above them. And I think that to that extent, if Alabama was over Texas, they can definitely be above Penn State right now. They've had dominant performances in the games that they have played against minimal competition, but a whiteout at home. I feel like for James Franklin and the confidence of that team, you really want to win that game, especially at home in Happy Valley. And you just didn't really see enough out of Penn State. Them being at 7 isn't completely absurd, but I think that they could have definitely been a little bit lower in these rankings.
Yeah, Penn State being at 7 and Texas being at 9, I think just both have to do with who they lost to. But I'm not a huge fan of either of them being as high as they are right now. I agree with the Alabama take. I do think that they should be higher, but also in the same vein, maybe Florida State shouldn't have dropped all the way down to 18, because I think you also kind of partially want to respect that head-to-head. Obviously, Florida State lost to Virginia, which is considered a much worse foe, but Virginia's now ranked in the top 25, and they've got a little bit of momentum building. So I think that there's some inconsistencies within this rankings that definitely stick out to me. One of the biggest things that I definitely know that we're going to touch on a little bit later is Oregon receiving 16 first place votes. I think now, with how poorly Texas played through their first 4 games, there's going to be a little bit of a move to say, hey, look, Ohio State's big win, maybe it wasn't as big. And Oregon over Penn State, there's still just seems like a ton of respect for Penn State. Hey, maybe they should be number 1. And I definitely see it. Although I did want to just point out, I just don't think that Miami deserved to get jumped in that sort of scenario, because Notre Dame looks like they're a little bit better. And, USF, I think you still should respect. So I think that their resume is good, but they'll show more now this week against Florida State.
Yeah, I completely agree from the Miami perspective. I think that the other kind of glaring thing this week was the top riser, which was Ole Miss, going up all the way to number 4. I think that is a good win against LSU, but number 4 in the country is a little bit steep for me, just because of the fact that LSU has shown weaknesses on offense. It feels like all season long, only putting up 20 points in a game that their defense gives them 5 interceptions, and that defense was susceptible to an offense led by Chambliss, who is a good player, but I don't know that I'm ready to crown him as one of the best quarterbacks in college football. So their defense being sliced up a little bit against Ole Miss was interesting to see, especially as somebody who thought that going in LSU might have a slight advantage in that game. But congrats to them for rising so far up the rankings. Number 4 for me is just a little bit much, because I don't know that I see Ole Miss as the number 4 team in the country, for that matter. I think Texas A&M is probably at number 6, is right there in consideration for one of those really top spots.
Yeah, maybe them being behind OU and Texas A&M was the right spot, or maybe the spot that I would have put them. A couple other things I definitely noticed: Illinois only rose up 1 for their win against USC, and I felt like it was a big bounce back win for them, and I thought it really showed a lot of character and test for that program. And them going from 23 to 22, and shout out Andrew, you picked that game. I think that was why you're giving me the look. I think that they should have been maybe a little bit higher. And I've been a big fan of, honestly, the way that Notre Dame has bounced back, even with their defense. But should Illinois be behind a 2-2 Notre Dame? I don't think so, even if you do want to rank Notre Dame. And then Mississippi State has a head-to-head over Arizona State. Arizona State is now ranked 25th. Mississippi State is the 3rd highest in the receiving votes category. I think that's close enough. I think I would have hoped a lot of voters put Mississippi State above Arizona State, because that's got to be something that we respect as the season goes on. And they have the same record. I believe, and I believe, right? Or unless Mississippi State's undefeated, they should definitely be above Arizona State regardless, though.
Yeah, they're not, but like they just they walked off, got not walked off in overtime by Tennessee, but like they took Tennessee to overtime. And I think that has got to like count for something as well. I think that a loss to Tennessee, who's one of the best teams in the country, against like Mississippi State, who didn't have those expectations coming into the season, also has that head-to-head win over Arizona State is something you have to look at from the AP voters and like just maybe question a little bit. It's the bottom of the ranking, so they get messed up. There's a ton of people that vote in these rankings, so it happens sometimes, but like I don't think that it was the exact right outcome, especially given the fact that the head-to-head is literally right there.
I can't believe I've forgotten the Mississippi State Tennessee game, but yeah, you're right. I think that does actually present itself as a good loss. I know some people might debate whether or not that actually exists. I definitely think it does. But I think I've noticed a really weird discrepancy here, and that is if two teams have the same record, so let's say 4-1, and one team has the loss to the other, but the other has a loss to a different team. I'm seeing that the AP poll is rewarding the team that has the head-to-head loss. If hopefully I explained that properly, because we're seeing that with Florida State and Alabama, and it's like, yeah, Florida State lost to Virginia, but they still beat Bama. So I'm kind of like, I know Bama's one loss is to Florida State, so like my brain's not computing. I'm thinking that at least where we are right now, you want to be able to respect that, because then if Alabama's resume and it should with their schedule compared to Florida State's, I know they got Miami this week, so that could change, but just the resume from the season as a whole, if Alabama's is really, really good and much better than Florida State's, and they both have one loss, that's where I could see you potentially throwing out a head-to-head, but not right now. I don't see enough. I mean, I really do think that Florida State should be above Alabama, and the same with Mississippi State over Arizona State. I think you have to respect that.
Yeah, it's tough to make the argument. It's a little bit tougher to make the argument for the latter half of those with the Alabama subject, just because of the fact that Virginia was a team that was barely receiving votes last week and has a loss to NC State, who also like isn't like the greatest football program in the world at this point. So I think they just lost to Virginia Tech this weekend, who lost to Old Dominion. So yeah, that's where those get like skewed a little bit. I can see how Florida State would drop super far after losing to Virginia team, but that was like I don't know, that was a trap game, my estimation, and it
Yeah.
wasn't like that doesn't count for anything in the rankings. It's not like, oh, you lost a trap game, like you only lose 3 spots instead of 10. But it is a drastic fall for FSU to go from 8 to 18 and in 1 week losing to Virginia. But it's also like how far, if we're going to make the argument of head to head, like how far do you let them drop? Because Virginia is not a top 20 team in the nation, and FSU isn't outside of the top 20, so you can't like physically put Virginia over Florida State, even though they just beat them.
I have issues with the AP poll, and I know it's not the final, like, end all be all, especially in, going into week 6. So it is what it is. Some other teams that fell out of the rankings, USC and TCU, I think both were probably warranted, especially with them being lower in the 20s. Did you have any final thoughts on this AP poll before we get out of here? I know I'm looking at some of the other 5-0 teams. They're kind of going to get their respect eventually. Georgia Tech, Vanderbilt, Iowa State, Indiana.
Yeah, I just kind of am interested to see how the Pac-12 shakes up as a whole. I think Texas Tech like falling right into that
Big
like
12,
just
yeah.
outside Big 12. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
You say Pac-12?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, okay, the Big 12 gets kind of just how the season goes on for them, because Texas Tech and Iowa State kind of headline that conference right now, but like teams like TCU and just like guys like right outside that are either sitting at 3-1, 4-1, can definitely make just a jump in that conference. So we'll see exactly how those go, but I think it's at least healthy for college football that the Big 12 is making at least some sort of fight. And Texas Tech looks like a legitimate program this year, and Iowa State just behind them also looks half decent this year.
Texas Tech got that oil money, so they'll potentially rise even further.
Yeah.
I don't think Arizona State's all that for real anymore, even though I was high on them in the preseason. I'm willing to jump off of it. Let's move into NFL Week 4 winners and losers. Andrew, we'll start with the winners.
Yeah. So my winners for this week are Brian Dable's potential job security and an extension for not an extension, but another year for him. And then the Jacksonville Jaguars. I'll start with Brian Dable. I think that this win and just in general, Jackson Dart playing half decent. He didn't have the greatest game in the world. He almost was a game manager, but that's kind of what you want in the scenario your possible franchise quarterback going into a game against an undefeated Chargers team that had a vaunted defense that everybody was talking about and just a good overall team. I don't think that you could have really asked for much more out of a start from him. And then also just that offense in general, obviously losing Malik Neighbors, which is super unfortunate, but Cam Scadaboo was good again this game and looks like he could be the running back in the future, maybe a tandem between him and Tyrone Tracy when they get back. So I think the fact that the Giants look competent and that defense has looked good all season. Like the defense hasn't been the reason why they've been losing games. It's because Russell Wilson couldn't find anything on offense except for that one game that he just absolutely went off. So I think that if Jackson Dart is a hit, I think that that buys Brian Daboll another year, especially given the fact that he can make the argument we didn't even have our best receiver for the majority of the season by the end of the season, and just everything that comes along with the defense being half decent this year. I think Brian Daboll possibly is one of the guys I want to crown as winner this weekend, their first win. And then the Jaguars, they get a win against one of the best teams in the NFL, obviously losing Nick Bosa the week before, but still, it's a good win for the Jags. They're 3-1, and they're a very competent team at this point. Trevor Lawrence is playing half decent football, and this is without Brian Thomas Jr. really being the guy that he was supposed to be this year. Travis Hunter hasn't lived up to the number 2 overall draft selection, and they're still 3-1 in a division that isn't incredibly tough and could possibly come out of that division if the Colts slip up at any point. So I think that looking forward for the Jags, not a terribly difficult schedule. I think that the Jags getting this win is definitely a good one for them.
I like both of those. I definitely think Daboll potentially bought himself another year, and then the Jags, just like that, 3-1, tied for the top of the division with the Colts. I believe the Colts win the tiebreaker or whatever. I think it's conference record. Just making sure that their season doesn't not slip away, but it's quick. It's funny how quick it happens in a sense, right? Where it feels like, wow, the Jags are 3-1. And so I definitely agree with both of those winners. The other winner that I have, or the winners that I have, are the Rams. We'll start with them first. They got that win over the Colts, bounce back week after blowing their lead and their win against the Eagles. I really am starting to like what I see from this Rams team. Puka Nacua is just on an absolute tear through the first 4 weeks of the season. He is looking like a true wide receiver 1. And maybe there wasn't a ton of doubts going into this year, but Stafford and him have a connection that, in my opinion, is one of the best in the league. And this division, in my opinion, with the 49ers getting a loss and the Cardinals getting a loss, it looks like the Rams, in my opinion, are the best team in that division. Obviously, I got to mention the Seahawks. They look really good too. They're 3-1. But if I had to bet, I would bet more on the Rams in the future. And then for my other winner, I have the Steelers. They go to Ireland and they beat a Carson Wentz-led Minnesota Vikings team. They had that game for a good majority of it. And I just think with getting a win there, moving to 3-1, and unfortunately with Lamar Jackson and the Ravens going to 1-3, Lamar Jackson could potentially miss some time with his hamstring injury. This bodes really well for the Steelers' future as far as making the playoffs and giving Aaron Rodgers and that team a chance to make a run in the playoffs. The Bengals right now look really terrible with Jake Browning, and the Browns were never a threat. So it's starting to look like this is something where the Steelers could be 5-1 and the Ravens are 2-4, and the Bengals might be whatever they are. I don't know what they would end up being. We're right 2-4 as well, and that's a pretty big lead for the Steelers. So I have them as some big winners here after week 4.
Yeah, taking a 3-game lead at any point in a division race is a pretty drastic lead, especially given the fact that when Lamar Jackson does come back, how is he going to look? Like, will he be hampered at all? And even if he's not, like the Ravens were losing games even with Lamar Jackson, which it is a little bit unfair because that Chiefs game wasn't completely in hand. It was for the majority. I don't think that Lamar Jackson would have made a spectacular comeback, but especially that Bills game coming off of a game that they probably should have won. The scenario doesn't maybe look as drastic if they're 2-2, but 1-3 starting and then also losing your starting quarterback for possibly a couple weeks definitely doesn't look great in a race where the Steelers have some easy opponents coming up. But things can change. But going 3 games down would be pretty drastic for the Steelers and or the Ravens. And then on the Steelers' perspective, it would look really, really good for them, possibly getting to have a game in a home game, a home playoff game, cup in the playoffs.
All right, let's move into your losers for week 4.
Yeah. So my losers, I think first one's pretty obvious. The Titans, just any hope for their season. Unfortunately, Cam Ward can't work miracles. That team, he doesn't have anybody around him. Calvin Ridley is becoming a shell of himself, which is really unfortunate because he's in back-to-back seasons, he put up over 1,000 yards, which I feel like that mark is getting increasingly less meaningful with more games and just quarterback stats going up a little bit. But still, 1,000-yard seasons, and I doubt he's going to hit that this year. And then Elic Iomaner is their top target at this point. Everything for the Titans just doesn't look that great. Their defense isn't really stopping anybody, and they can't put points up on the board. They literally were the only team to get shut out this week. And then moving on, the Raiders and Geno Smith. I think that the Raiders are in a similar situation or maybe not a similar situation, but they're in a bad situation where they're 1-3, and they're really looking at Geno Smith and questioning their quarterback decision at this point, going out and trading for him from the Seahawks and getting Pete Carroll to lead that offense essentially, or like lead the whole team. But Geno Smith throwing 3 picks on Sunday and essentially losing them that game. They had the Bears on the ropes for the majority of that game, and that should be a game where you look back, they're 2-2 if Geno just plays half decent, but you really have to start looking at the quarterback situation and how good can that team be if Geno's only like a top 20 quarterback in the league. Like Geno has to be a top 12 quarterback in the league for that situation in Las Vegas to work, and I don't think that he's anywhere around that range right now. So the Raiders situation looks pretty drastic at this point, and they should, if he's going to play like he has been over the last couple of games, they're going to need to move off him relatively quickly within the next year or two. So we'll see how that situation goes. But Raiders and Titans just in general for the season might be losers on that front.
Such an unfortunate move for the Raiders, especially when you just compare it to what's going on with Sam Darnold and the Seahawks and them being 3-1. Geno Smith, 6 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. Plenty of Saddam Hussein edits as well going around. So that's when you know it's getting bad. So the Raiders are not in a good position. Also, they're in one of the toughest divisions in the National Football League. So I think that they're pretty much cooked as far as being, any sort of competitive team in that division or in the AFC. The Titans, Cam Ward can only not turn the ball over for so long. It was in the first 2 weeks, and now they've become the second shutout of the season, and the Texans get their tune-up win before they move on. So things just aren't turning out well. Expectations were low for the Titans, but would have liked to see them maybe steal one of these first 4 games. They got the Cardinals, Raiders, Patriots, Colts. So they got some winnable games coming up over the next 4. My losers are the Panthers and the hope for this season. Right when you think that they might be turning things around. Yeah, I didn't think so. But they get that shutout win over the Falcons, and then they score the first touchdown against the Patriots, and then the Patriots have 42 unanswered points after that. And then classic Panthers fashion, they tack on a touchdown really late. And I don't really think it's all Bryce Young's fault, but I'm just out now. I don't know if it's going to work. And I think it's so unfortunate. He was so dynamic at Alabama, and I think he's got it. Like, he really has like the it factor, but I just don't know if he's got and I don't even think it's just his height. I just don't know if he's got the physical tools or just the tools even around him in a sense to make this work. And I think the Panthers are going to be in a position next season to draft a quarterback, because I like Dave Canales as a head coach. I think he's a good offensive coach as well. If it's that you just can't have games like this against a team like the Patriots. And I like the Patriots. I think that they are a decent team in the NFL. They're not a 42-13 team or like win type of team over somebody who is decent. Like the Panthers in that case have to be awful. And that's exactly what it is. They're losers after this week. And then Ravens losing Lamar Jackson and potentially staring down the barrel of 1-5 or 2-4 is not a good place to be. They have played some really good teams and lost some close games too in the first few weeks. But that injury, on top of the Steelers win, I have to couple it up with my winner and say that they're also losers. Got to respect the Chiefs and the Bills. 2 of their losses coming at the hands of some of the top teams in the AFC, but 1-3 now, and their schedule isn't exactly like easy coming up. So I have to put them as my losers.
Yeah, I don't really see any disagreements with any of that. And then also you throw in the Lions game in there too, where they're going back and forth and then end up losing a 38-30 shootout. Like those are three games that are like winnable, but like against really hard teams. And at this point, you would have liked to see them be able to pull out one or two of those because of the fact that Lamar Jackson goes down now and the season just looks a lot bleaker than it did a couple weeks ago. But starting from your first loser. I think that the Panthers are just it is very bleak for them, and I think we've gone over how we both feel about the Panthers a little bit, but I didn't really have any faith. In Bryce Young from like the start of the season, I think I bought into it a little bit towards the end of last season, and there was like just a sliver of like he could be good in my mind, but like from week one, I just haven't seen anything that I've been impressed with, and even in that win that they had, the shutout win against the Falcons, it was more of like the defense and just everybody else putting a holistic performance together than I really thought. Oh, Bryce Young dominated this game. He's the sole reason why they had such a dominating win over the Falcons. And I think the Falcons also just didn't play very well. They didn't cross the 30-yard line and the opponent's 30-yard line in that game. So yeah, for the Panthers, I could very easily see them having another season where they have one of the top picks in the NFL draft, and I don't know exactly who you're taking at this point. If you have one of the top picks in the NFL draft, but this could very easily be Bryce Young's final season starting at quarterback.
So the Dolphins got their first win of the year against the Jets on Monday Night Football, but unfortunately, it came at a price. Tyreek Hill also tore multiple ligaments in his knee, as well as dislocating his knee. So he's out for the season. Kind of just talk about, let's start with the Tyreek Hill injury here, and then maybe we'll move into where exactly the Dolphins go from here, because obviously it's still looking like a season that could potentially be lost.
Yeah, I think this is probably the weirdest carting off I've ever seen in my life, just because of the fact that
Yes.
Tyreek Hill was seemingly ecstatic that he like had just lost his whole season, which I don't know if that's what playing with Tua does for you for an extended period of time or what exactly that reaction was. But I genuinely still can't wrap my head around what exactly was going on. I saw some people in the comment sections being like he was just trying to raise his adrenaline so it wouldn't hurt as much and stuff like that. But still, like I that just whole scene was so interesting because you go into that commercial break and you're like, man, that's really bad, and then you see the car come out and it's obviously going to be really bad. But I just never seen anything quite like that, where like he's like just like smiling the whole way through and clapping and like waving to the fans and stuff like that. So just that whole situation was weird. But that injury is super drastic and possibly like Tyreek Hill's explosiveness and his speed is his whole game. Like not his whole game, like his hands are really good too. But the fact that that could be hampered at all could be really bad for just his career going forward. I don't think that this is. I think this might be the last season that he ends up playing with the Dolphins. But he's still an NFL caliber wide receiver. But how much does that impact him? How sought after is he going into this offseason could be impacted by like the fact that teams are at an unknown of what he looks like going into next season. I obviously can't put a finger on what that's going to look like for him moving forward, but I think that could be pretty drastic because like tearing a bunch of ligaments in your knee and it facing the wrong direction obviously does not look good for him going forward. So prayers up for Tyreek Hill, and just what an interesting scenario because he was definitely one of the drivers of that offense and on an offense that looked pretty good in that Monday Night Football game.
An offense that over the last handful of years, when they're on, there's probably nobody that's better. Like that offense just has like I'm serious. It has a peak, that a lot of offenses don't have that we've seen over the last handful of years. And now, granted, they don't really reach it all that often, but when they do, you notice it. Yeah, sorry. But I'll go with like the perspective for the rest of his career here. I believe he's guaranteed over $70 million still. And I don't know what that carting off situation was looking like. I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. But, because at the end of the day, like, would you really want to just like not play the rest of the season if it meant like almost having your leg amputated? Because, he didn't have any he definitely probably had some nerve damage, but he didn't like tear anything or sever anything that would cause that. But like he could have. So I don't know if, he was thinking like in a way that he would sacrifice the rest of the year through an injury just to not play. But so I'll give him the benefit of the doubt there. But it was very unusual for him to be such high spirits. I think also too he was very happy. I think that the Dolphins fans were giving him giving him a nice little like clap, standing O. Like maybe that was it. But Yeah, this for the rest of his career, I think that, in my opinion, and I know nobody's really asking for it, and I'm not an NFL player, obviously, so I don't know what his finances looking like. But I think that this is a point where you potentially walk away from the game. Honestly, yeah, I don't really. He's got a Super Bowl ring. He's got hundreds of millions of dollars. He's got guaranteed money still left on his contract. Um, and yeah, you're probably right. He probably won't play another game for the Dolphins. And he's 31 years old, and we probably won't see him again until what? He's 33. I mean, I don't see it being a situation where, I mean, or maybe 32. I guess he's born on March 1st. So if he comes back next season, like, I don't really see a point in him coming back. And you're right, like the speed will be hampered. Although he's one of the fastest players that I've seen like in-game speed like ever. So like if he takes a step back, he's still one of the fastest players in the game. So I don't know. I don't know. I think maybe that was it though. I think maybe we saw the last.
Yeah, I don't think so at all. I think that like between like the personal stuff that he's going through, like I
Yeah,
genuinely think
I
that
don't
he
know
might.
specifically like how much he's paying, but
Yeah, he might be strapped for money though, because apparently he's getting sued by that same like woman, and like all this different stuff going on in his personal life. I definitely think that he could use a couple more seasons in the NFL, get a couple more dollars. But yeah, he also tore, like, part of it was that he tore his ACL as well. So I don't know exactly how that is gonna look for him going forward, and in what his return timeline will be like, if it's gonna be a full year of recovery. But yeah, it's pretty drastic in the like, because he tore, like, they was bordering on like like not. I don't want to make any statements that are too brash, but like I was hearing stuff like about like bordering amputation, which is like
if he
kind
had
of.
severed like yeah, you're right. He like tore his ACL among other ligaments. I don't know if they've named like LCL or MCL, which are like the other more common ones. But like whenever I see multiple ligaments in his knee were torn, including the ACL, I'm thinking maybe there's a lot more. There's like some smaller ligaments that potentially are just more uncommon with like athletic injuries and more common with like dislocations of the knee. When I hear that, and I hear like there are other potential injuries that he could have suffered by dislocating his knee, I know that that means amputation because he's going to have some like to repair some of the nerves and stuff like that. I'm hoping his surgery goes well. But yeah, like that's what makes this so difficult for him to come back from is like that specific injury. If he tore his ACL, I mean, dude, people come back so quick. They come back so quick. I hate to just be like, oh, it's automatic, but yeah, he probably would have come back if that was the case. But I think like dislocating the knee like that, dude, that was a scary injury. That was really bad.
Yeah, and maybe pivoting a little bit, because I think
Yeah.
they covered the majority of the base on like what it actually means for his career. But yeah, going forward for like Dolphins, like the Dolphins organization, I genuinely don't know what you do from here, because you don't want to call it a lost season because your top receiver goes out. But like I don't know how like impactful it's going to be to like as somebody who actively roots for the Dolphins. Like, this team isn't winning the Super Bowl, and this team would be very lucky to get to the playoffs. There's always a path, but like I and you never want to see a team tank the season, but like this could be a genuine situation where if it starts going really south, which they have a couple easy games going forward, so their record could look fine, but like there's a scenario where Mike McDaniel gets fired in the middle of the season. So I which would suck, but at this point I'm kind of done with this edition of the Dolphins. Like, there is probably a ceiling that was reached that one year that Tua led the NFL in passing yards and was an MVP candidate, and the offense was absolutely humming, and they're like 8-2 at some point. But I don't think that that this Dolphins team is that Dolphins team is recreatable for this Dolphins team. I think that Jalen Waddle will probably go somewhere else in the coming seasons, and Tua is. I think that the majority of the people in Miami are leaning more towards Tua out than still leaning in on him.
Yeah, I think it's over too. I think this era, and we had talked about this after week one. Essentially, was like, are we getting more of this game against that they had against the Colts for the rest of the year? I think we see Quinn Ewers probably start a game at some point this year too. Like, I think that there's going to be a point at the end of this season where it's not a tank. It's just seeing what you got. Maybe they see what they have in an assistant coach, somebody who's in the building and could be a candidate for the head coaching position in the future. I think that that's kind of where this season has gone, and it is really unfortunate because yeah, they got to win 1-3. and maybe we were saying this before the Tyreek Hill injury, but if they were to sneak into the playoffs, the ceiling for this team is a lot lower without Tyreek Hill. He's so dynamic of a player, and it gets to a point where you can't really make an argument where it was like, oh, if their offense just catches fire in the playoffs, you never know. Like, I understand a lot of people might scoff at that and think that's funny, but like from just an NFL perspective, if you make the playoffs, like that's and you're a wild card team or a team that's not favored to win the Super Bowl, or you're on the road for all of those games, that's kind of the angle that you need to win a Super Bowl. And that's
They
not
lost that
there.
angle. Yeah.
It's not there anymore. And you're like, like we've said, 1-3, lost your best receiver. Tua probably not going to be a franchise guy. And I think it's done. Yeah. 1-3, call it. All right, let's move into the final topic that we have for today. Miami Hurricanes. They slipped to number 3, or got jumped rather, by the Oregon Ducks after their big win over Penn State. So we'll talk about the rankings first. Is that valid? And then we'll move into the Florida State pregame here that we have.
Yeah, so as a Miami Hurricanes fan, I think that is valid. I think that the rankings are the way that they are for a reason. And when you get a big win, especially away in college football, it means something. Miami has a chance to do the exact same thing, unfortunately, at a much smaller scale because the FSU lost. But I think that that Oregon win should be credited as much as you possibly can. That is possible. I don't even want to say possibly, probably the most dangerous environment that you can go to. Like a whiteout in Happy Valley is one of the loudest crowds you'll ever see with everything that goes into playing at Penn State. And I understand they don't win big games, but still that whiteout is one of the most electric crowds you'll ever see anywhere. So I think that it should count for something. And Miami has plenty of time to get it back, or if not, like if they end up staying at like 3, even after the FSU win, I don't think that it's like a slight or any disrespect. Like Oregon at this point has like the better top end win, and Ohio State obviously when Texas was the number 1 team in the country also has that. And when you look at overall schedules, you might think that Miami's is a little bit better, but I think those top end wins definitely help for something, especially because of the fact that Oregon wasn't trailing like a ton of spots before them. It's not like they jumped from like number 10 to number 2. They were number 6, and they played a top 3 team away and won. So I am not like super upset about the rankings, and there's plenty of time in the season where Oregon either falters or Miami just makes an incredible run and stays within that top 1 to 2 spot.
I'm not angry about it, but I do disagree. I will acknowledge that Oregon going on the road to Penn State is probably the best win from any team in the country so far. And I think we see that partially in the rankings. Now, that's why they got 16 first place votes, because others saw it above Ohio State's win against Texas. But I think that Miami's body of work is edging them out when you compare both of these teams. I like the Notre Dame win. Like, I still think that that's a really good win, even in week 1 with CJ Carr's first start for them, and the way that they were able to kind of control that game from the line of scrimmage. And I do still value, to a certain extent, USF, who received votes again this week. They will be a top 25 team, especially with the rest of their schedule at a certain point. I think that dominant win was really impressive. And then I'm okay with the way that they handled Florida. Like the score was closer than the game actually was. And I still think Florida is a talented team that plays hard. They're just not good enough to close out games. And DJ Lagway is just really bad. But Miami imposed their will on Florida in that game. I like the body of work more than I like Oregon's. I don't know. I mean, shoot, if it's almost a draw in a sense, but I would have probably liked to see Miami stick at number 2. Also because I just felt like it was a reluctant number 2 ranking for them when they jumped up. Like, it felt like they should have been number 2 a little bit sooner. So then right when they go up to number 2, then Oregon jumps them immediately. That kind of is a little bit rough to me. And then next week they have Florida State. If they beat Florida State, I do think that they should definitely jump Oregon, because Florida State, they'll probably drop out of the rankings. I still like that win, and I think it needs to be recognized. And then Oregon, off of a bye, will get a chance, if they beat Indiana, to then jump Miami again. I think we're going to see potentially flip-flops over the next few weeks between those teams. So it doesn't really matter in the long run, but that's kind of where I stand as far as Miami and Oregon.
Yeah, I think that's kind of where I'm at too. The reason why I'm like not super adamant about it is because the AP poll doesn't mean all that
Yeah.
much, and then also it is going to be like a flip flop based off who they're playing. I feel like if any of the ACC opponents start rattling off wins and maybe Miami gets another top 25 matchup at some point in the season, it could look a little bit better on their resume, and they maybe if they get a big win there, they flip and jump back uh over Oregon, because Oregon schedule, I think Indiana is like probably the toughest team that they have left on their schedule. They don't play Ohio State this year. I think they miss out on they miss out on some other tough games as well. So I it could genuinely be a situation where they're just flip flopping back and forth, and they're easily two of the best three teams in the country. So I think that there's like a little bit of a distinction now between like Ohio State, Oregon, and Miami, and then coming up and bringing up the rear a little bit, Ole Miss and the teams that are behind them. But I could see a world where those three teams are like interchangeable in any given week, probably with Ohio State staying at number one for the time being, and then Miami and Oregon being a flip flop between how many first place votes they're getting in any given week.
Miami and Florida State face off this week in one of the better installments that we've got in the rivalry in recent years. Florida State was not able to uphold their end of the bargain against Virginia, unfortunately. So game day dip, they're going to Vandy, Alabama. But this still is a top 25 matchup, number 3 versus number 18. What are we thinking from Miami's perspective on this game?
Well, kind of basing it off those rankings, if you want to see the number 2 spot for Miami, it has to be like a dominant performance from like all phases of football. Like I think that Carson Beck has the ability to go out, especially with the receiving talent that he has around him, to go out and have a really good game. But if you see a performance where he is like, if he's throwing interceptions, he's back to his 2024 form rather than 2023. It could be a long night for Miami in general. Like this isn't going to be an easy win. This is a rivalry game. This is a game that both these teams like it becomes, I feel like with the transfer portal and everything around college football now, the rivalry is like not as much hated as it was like maybe growing up or like even a couple years back, but like still it is Miami versus FSU. These teams don't like each other. They want to beat each other. So I think that if Miami isn't on their A game, they can very easily lose this game, especially at Doak Campbell. But I think that they're on the opposite end of that spectrum. Miami has the talent on offense and on defense to completely outclass FSU, and we'll see how that ends up going. But FSU obviously showed some weakness, and specifically defensively last week against Virginia. And Tommy touchdowns, Tommy Castellano can be had with at times. He's a great dual threat quarterback, but that defense is definitely going to be the best that they've played so far this season, which is so refreshing to say because of how bad it was last year. Like genuinely, it's like a complete 180 for everything defensive wise for Miami this season. Ruben Bain is one of the Heisman Trophy at least candidates at this point, which is super nice to see as a Miami defense that just didn't have anything last year. And Miami is obviously the lean. Miami's my favorite team. Miami is the team that I'm going to be rooting for in this game. But look out for like at least a close game if anything goes wrong offensively, I think.
Yeah, I think there's a couple things for FSU that they could potentially do to make this game a lot closer than some people might think. But I'll start with Miami right now. You mentioned that they have the players to outclass Florida State. Florida State has good players, but Miami on the offensive and defensive lines is dominant. They are potentially one of the best units, like offensive and defensive lines in the country, that combo. And we saw it against Notre Dame. They pushed them around. And we definitely saw that against USF. Now, I think Florida State's a lot closer to Notre Dame than they are to USF, but you have a running quarterback here or a dual threat guy, because he could throw the ball, plenty as well. But you have a running quarterback here who you're trying to stop. And I think Miami will definitely be able to do it because they just absolutely shut Byron Brown down in his rushing attack. And in my opinion, that is Florida State's key that they won't be able to have against Miami. And I think that really puts them in a bad position to be able to make this game a lot closer. Now, if they have a run game in general, then we can talk. If they're able to just run the ball behind their running backs as well and open up some of the passing game, that is where I think the pressure is taken off of Castellanos, and he can end up throwing the ball and have a little bit of a less pressured type of game. Because if he doesn't have everything on his shoulders to make plays happen on offense, that's where I can see Florida State potentially putting a few points on the board here against Miami. But I don't think that will happen. I think the offensive and defensive lines for Miami are just too good. I think they'll protect Carson Beck. I think Miami will be able to run the ball. And I think we're going to see a Miami win, probably by at least 2 touchdowns. I really do think this is a really good team. And yeah, I mean, maybe Florida State, maybe I'd be talking a little bit different if they didn't get caught up in that trap game last week. But that was a really, really bad showing for them. And Virginia's a good team, but not Miami.
Yeah, I will just go in a different direction slightly because the fact that I think that loss makes them play a little bit like maybe not drastically harder, but like the fact that they would be facing back-to-back losses and dropping out of the top 25 makes them want this win a little bit more. But I also like I can definitely see a way in like a way in this game that Thomas Castellano gets out of the pocket and is able to like run on this Miami defense, which is unfortunate. The defensive ends that Miami has are super athletic. Akeem Mesdor in the middle is like one of the best defensive players in the country, but Thomas Castellano can really run the football. He's faster than Byron Brown was. I think was the like distinction there a little bit. And obviously he can be a pocket passer when he needs to be. So I think that FSU, I'm maybe not like 2 touchdown favorites, but I think FSU has like a chance in establishing the run game. And when you have the run game going as well as a quarterback who can throw the football, anything could happen. But I still, the lean is definitely still Miami with me. And I think that Miami might win by a touchdown, but I think that this could easily be a back and forth game.
All right. Well, I think that we covered everything. Looking forward and looking ahead, we got NBA. The NBA training camps are now kind of getting underway. The NBA season is right around the corner, and we got plenty of football on the way, as well as MLB playoffs too coming up. So maybe we'll talk a little bit about that. But thank you guys so much for watching. This has been the Big Little Podcast. I'm your host, Patrick Previty. That is Andrew Greig. See you guys next time.